Welcome back to Unleashing You. Today, I speak with Erika Diaz. Erika is a multi-talented enterprise leader with over 14 years of experience across various industries and verticals in the staffing industry. Most recently, Erika became the founder and CEO of her own consultancy, Strategenius, where she works with clients to upskill account management teams. Erika has become a trusted consultant and leader for global brands with a track record of success in solving complex problems, improving customer satisfaction, and driving overall contingent workforce program growth and enhancements. Through her success, she has also battled depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. She is an advocate for mental health and wellness, both personally and professionally. Erika launched the Honestly Mental podcast in January 2023. Her aim is to talk vulnerably and openly about her struggles, challenging the stigmas surrounding mental health. She and her guests provide insights into the daily life with mental health issues, providing tips and advice for listeners who may be going through similar battles, often in silence. She hopes to change this, believing that no one should struggle alone. Erika is a client and a friend, and I am grateful that she is joining me today to have this important conversation that I know we all can benefit from. Before we dive in, I want to mention that this episode contains discussions about suicide, which some listeners may find distressing. If you or someone you know is struggling, please consider seeking support from a mental health professional or calling or texting 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline in the U.S. Let's get into the episode. Before we begin, I want to make sure that you have the Unleashing You retreat on your radar, because just the fact that you're tuning into this podcast means the Unleashing You retreat is right up your alley. The reason I created the Unleashing You retreat is because as women, we tend to look to everyone else for the answers. We somehow think that everyone else knows better than we do, when in reality, tapping into your own intuition is actually the key to living a happy and fulfilled life. And that's how I've created the career and life I have now, and what we'll teach you how to do during this retreat. An inner shift like this will leave you with tools that you'll use for the rest of your life. This retreat is so much more than a girls' trip. This is a transformation. If I've piqued your interest, I want to personally invite you to join us in Steamboat Springs, Colorado on September 19th through the 22nd. During our time together, we will go through coaching workshops and other deep personal development activities that will uncover aspects of yourself you never even knew. Work like this would take months or years to do on your own, and we're going to get you there in just a few short days. Not to mention, we'll be staying in a gorgeous mountain home, complete with a private chef, so you don't have to lift a finger. If you are ready for a pampering getaway where you can recharge your batteries and feed your soul, send me a message on Instagram or visit acrprofessionalcoaching.com to learn more and reserve your spot. Spots are very limited, so do not wait. And I'll see you in the mountains. Now, let's get on to today's show. Welcome to Unleashing You. This podcast is your permission slip to create success your way. I'm your host, Amanda Riffey, a certified success coach and female business leader who has climbed her way up the corporate ladder. I've been through burnout and back, and found the tools to bring fun and enjoyment to my career while creating powerful results and leading in a way that feels authentic to me. This show brings you conversations with women just like you who have created massive success for themselves and are doing it in their own way. We'll hear about their personal journeys of growing their career while still prioritizing the things they love most. If you are ready to be challenged and encouraged to reach your next level, then buckle up, sister, because the road to dreamy success begins here. Let's dive in. Erika, welcome to Unleashing You. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here on your podcast and talking about what we're going to be diving into today.
Yes, I completely agree. I think this is such an important conversation when we think about career-driven people, which everyone that listens to this podcast typically is. That topic of mental health is something that is so important. And I know that you and I have chatted about this quite a few times outside of this episode. I was even on your podcast that focuses all around mental health, something that's near and dear to my heart. And I know it is a personal mission of yours as well. So I really am looking forward to this conversation. I think it's going to be really meaningful and impactful and important. It's something that we need to be talking about.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yes. Okay. So for everyone who is maybe new to you, can you start out with just kind of giving us a rundown of your story, your career so far? Let us know a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a wife, a mama, and a woman in leadership. I have two amazing boys, Jude and Oliver. Jude is 11, Oliver is 4. And I've had a pretty progressive career path within the staffing industry for almost 15 years now. So I recently launched my podcast, Honestly Mental, in January of this year, something that aims to break the stigma surrounding mental health, to continue the conversation. And we're going to be diving into that more today.
Yes, we will. And I'm really looking forward to that. And side note, again, I know this was not the forefront of your conversation, but we both have 11-year-olds named Jude. How crazy is that?
That's super crazy. And I think it's not a very popular name. And they're 11. Who knew?
And they're 11. It was meant to be. We'll have to get them together
really
at some point.
Yes, that would be amazing.
Yes, but I digress because that is not the topic of our conversation today. But anyone who knows both of us is like, wait a second, they both have an 11-year-old named Jude. So on a more serious note, I actually got introduced to you when you did a talk for a conference that we were both attending, and you were a speaker. I was leading a roundtable discussion, and that was where I first heard your story around really how work became your identity and then it broke you. I'm just literally getting goosebumps right now just saying that out loud because I know I could see so much of myself in your story and so much of other people that I know personally, whether, I work with them through coaching or, just in my personal life. And so, number one, thank you so much for being willing to share your story and be so vulnerable. Because what I think it does is it really shows us that we're not alone and it brings that to the surface. So I would love for you to kind of share your version of your story around how work really became your identity and then what happened because of that.
Yeah. So I entered the workforce very young. I was 14 years old, and that wasn't because I wanted to work. It was really out of necessity. I had to pay for my own toiletries, like shampoo and toothpaste and all of that. And my home life, I would say, came from very humble beginnings, and it was very difficult. So when I started working, it was an escape from my home life, and it was my safe place. It's where I could go, similarly to school. I could go to school, get good grades, and really control outcomes, if you will, because there wasn't a whole lot of stability in my life growing up. So starting off at an ice cream parlor, scooping ice cream is when I entered the workforce. And really, it started then because I was receiving external validation about my work performance and I got used to it. And it kind of just, as the years progressed, it would stack one compliment after another, one achievement over another. And that really became who I was because I was so young. I didn't develop an identity outside of work. So each time something really good happened, I attributed it to my persona at work. And at the end of the day, what ended up happening in early 2023 is work was difficult. And honestly, it wasn't anything that was abnormal, to be completely transparent. But for me, I didn't feel seen and heard. And that was really the first time that I experienced that in the work environment to the level in which it was occurring. And so it was monumental for me. And it completely broke me. I started dealing with suicidal ideation and wanting to unalive myself. I was in a major depressive episode and my anxiety was off the charts. I was having panic attacks, and it could be just a work call that would drive me into a panic attack. And so I entered a partial hospitalization program, which as a PHP, and it was a program that is crisis management. So it helps you get out of the mindset and the spiraling that occurs when you are having suicidal thoughts. But it's not quite the level of care when you are inpatient, because inpatient, there's a risk to you or others. There's risk there, but it's not requiring 24-hour care in a safe environment. And so in that program, we were talking about affirmations. And I don't know how you are with affirmations, Amanda, but I have them all over the place. I still have a hard time believing them, though. And so it's just one of those things that we were talking about them, and I raised my hand. I was kind of being a little snarky, I'm not going to lie. And I was like, so let me get this straight. What you're saying is if I say these daily affirmations each day in front of a mirror, that one day it's just going to click and everything's going to settle down and I'm going to believe it. And because I was used to going to work, I wasn't working at the time, and I was continuing to explain this. And then the clinician stopped me and she said, so Erika, the moment work became your safe place, it was no longer work. So let me just repeat that one more time, right? The moment work becomes your safe place, it is no longer work. And that is the moment that I was able to say my entire identity. I wasn't a mom first. I was not a wife first. My entire identity was wrapped up in work, and it crushed me. But that's what I needed to hear to be able to turn things around and start delineating my personas and putting first the things that matter in life, which are my family. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell.
Yeah. Okay. So a few things that I want to hit on in what you said, and I'm so glad that you repeated that statement around the minute work became your safe place, it's no longer work. And I got goosebumps when you said that, because I think there's so many of us that can relate to that. I know, when I was leading a corporate team, we would work on that a lot in one-on-ones because, again, we would just tie up so much of our identity in these work projects and how things were going at work. And I'm like, your work is not your worth. Like, those are not the same thing. And you get paid to do a job, and hopefully it's a job that you love, because that's what makes it fun and that's what makes it worth it. A big mission, I know, of both of us, but it's still a job. It's not who we are. And especially if you're an entrepreneur or if you're working in corporate, that job could be gone tomorrow. And you are still here. You are still just as worthy. You are still just as capable, all of those things. And I think looking at it from that perspective is like, and not in a negative way of like, hey, you could get laid off tomorrow. But honestly, that is the truth, right? That job could be gone tomorrow, but that's not who you are. You will find another job. You will create another business. You will, do whatever it is that you need to do, because that's not your worth. That's not your safe place. What would you add to that?
I think it's so easy to tie your identity to work because we spend the majority of our time at work too. So it's really, really easy to get caught up in this trap of your work persona being all consuming, especially if you're providing income for your family. That's how you're taking care of your life, whether you're a primary breadwinner or not, and it's more equal. And so I think that just highlighting we spend most of our time at work, but that does not define who we are. And you said it best when you said it is your work is not your worth, because it absolutely is not.
Yes, yes. And the other thing that you mentioned around affirmations, and I'm glad you brought up that point around are affirmations just like a bunch of BS? Like, I'm not really sure that I believe them because, I do think to a certain extent they can be. But what I work on with my clients is rewiring it to a belief that feels true for you, but is empowering. So, like an example, right, might be money is hard to make, right? That's a common one that I think a lot of us have. Like, money is hard to make. That would be our limiting belief. And so what you can do is you can reframe that to not like, oh, I'm a millionaire if you're not a millionaire, because you're going to read that and be like, well, that's not true, right? And so you have to really believe it.
Exactly.
What's the next best thing that is empowering, but also feels true for you? So it might be, I get to have fun while I make money. And you might be able to point out 3 or 4 examples in your life of how that is actually true. And so then when you continue to look at that and repeat that and kind of bring that into your subconscious, that now feels empowering and true. And so that's what I always think is kind of the key for affirmations or belief work, is making it kind of that next best thing that also feels good for you.
Yeah. And finding the examples that support it is very helpful. And it takes practice, because one of my affirmations that I continuously try and work on is I am worthy. At the end of the day, if I'm being vulnerable and transparent here, I don't have this level of self-love and compassion for myself that I wish I had, because I don't feel I'm worthy. And being in therapy is something that she has me expanding on how I can find the facts that that's not true. And it's still hard for me, but practice, guys, when it comes to finding something that really you do truly believe, or you want to believe. In my case, I said I am worthy. I'm not quite there yet, but looking for the facts is hugely critical in making the affirmations stick. And you've got to find one that resonates with you, because there are so many out there and they don't necessarily work for everyone. And for others, they do an amazing job. Belief work is so crazy when you think about it. Our brains are just amazing.
Yes. I hope you're enjoying today's episode. I wanted to quickly interrupt to invite you to schedule your own private coaching session with me. A standalone one-on-one session is the perfect avenue for those times when you need a kickstart towards your next goal. We can unpack so much in 50 minutes. You will leave your session feeling inspired, motivated, and with clear next steps that feel so aligned with you. These private coaching sessions are the quick hits that will uncover your mindset blocks and get you back on the fast track to whatever you're working toward in your career or life. Your session is your time, so we can work through anything that will impact you the most. Let me help you finally see your blind spots so that you can get out of your own way and head toward the next amazing version of you. Send me a message on Instagram or visit acrprofessionalcoaching.com to book your session today. Now, back to the episode. And when you said about looking for the facts or looking for the evidence, I think that is one of the biggest keys to doing that type of work, because your subconscious is going to look for evidence that supports your beliefs. So if you are constantly thinking you're not worthy or money's hard to make or, what, fill in the blank, your subconscious is constantly scanning for evidence to support that. So it's like, when you feel like, oh my gosh, everything went wrong today. Well, everything went wrong today because that's what you see. Like literally your subconscious is blocking out anything that went well. Now, again, that doesn't mean, there wasn't things that happened, doesn't make those untrue. But when you can start to rewire that and think from that more empowering place and then go out and look for the evidence, which is why I love journaling in the morning and looking for those 3 things that I'm grateful for today. And I always look for the small things, right? Like I'm grateful that I work from home. I'm grateful for this cup of coffee I have. I'm grateful that it's sunny outside. Those are things that, again, they might seem really small, but when you continue to look for that evidence, you're rewiring those beliefs to then support that evidence as well. So, Erika, I'd love to hear from you on what's different about how you approach your career today versus back then.
It's still a work in progress. And I think what I have done is a lot of reframing work in recognizing it was like the dichotomy of 2 personalities. I had my work person and then I had my home life person. And at the end of the day, I am one human. And so it was something that recognizing that brought me more into my identity and the other things that were more important, like focusing on my family. Those came to the forefront. And not to say that my career isn't as important, because it certainly is. I still am very motivated and highly driven and want to be successful, but I don't allow it to consume all of my being. And at the end of the day, it's just work. There are so many other things out there that are more important. And that is hard. That's a hard pill to swallow for someone like me, and probably for you listening, because you want to succeed. And it's just one of those things that you have to be real and honest with yourself to get to that point. And so, like I said, I'm still a work in progress. I'm still figuring it out, but really, I can tell you my tolerance for stress is actually lower than what it used to be, because now I'm more one holistic being, and characteristics that I had separated because it wasn't a work characteristic, I'm coming as my full authentic self. And so that was something that I observed just as I went back into work and some different things. But yeah, it takes a lot of work, a lot of practice, and it's a work in progress.
Yeah. And you said, these weren't your words, these are my words, but like you're one whole person inside and outside of work. And that is something that I believe wholeheartedly, because, what's going on personally impacts how we show up at work and vice versa. And whether I'm working with an employee as a leader or for me through coaching, like I do, a lot of career type of coaching, but you best believe we talk about all the things, right? Like we're talking about personal stuff. We're talking about job stuff. We're talking about everything, because it all impacts each other. And compartmentalizing for that, like that, is actually not healthy for us to do. It's when we just show up as our whole self. And I know there's definitely situations where people don't feel safe showing up as their full self in every situation. And that's something that I think we're working to hopefully change as a society, that people can feel safe showing up as their whole self in all situations. Because like you said, that's really where we find that fulfillment and that alignment, is when we don't feel like we have to like hide away a part of ourselves in different situations to be something else for somebody. So you now, based on your personal experiences, you now have a very important mission. And I know your mission is to really raise awareness for mental health, especially in the workplace. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I think about what you were just saying and the old adage of leave your problems at the door. It's really just not realistic. It's not. And I think employers are starting to recognize it. I think COVID pushed us into this. If anything good came out of COVID, I think one of the things is the attention on mental wellness and well-being. And employers are looking at options. There's still a long ways that we have to go, but employers are looking at options to bring the full authentic beings to work. And I think emotional literacy is important. So what I mean by that is a little bit further than emotional intelligence. A lot of us, especially in the staffing space, know about emotional intelligence because our product is typically a human being. And so we have to interact with the workforce and the talent to attract and retain them.
Yeah. And I think you're so right in talking about, again, if there's anything good that came out of COVID, it's that attention on mental wellness, a little bit more maybe of that like kind of work-life balance, work-life integration, whatever is the word. Some people do not like the word work-life balance, but it is such an important topic. And I'm glad that it is gaining a little bit more of kind of that mainstream talk and the attention of some of, those bigger companies, because again, just going back to what we were talking about before, you can't leave your problems at the door, and you shouldn't leave your problems at the door, because when you can show up as your best self at work, you're going to be more productive. You're going to be more engaged. You're going to bring a better version of you to your team, right? It is only in a company's best interest, in my opinion, to focus on that mental health, mental wellness, and not just as like a box that you want to tick of like, oh yes, we have wellness programs, but like really putting that at the forefront and integrating it into the culture of your work environment. So I know one of the reasons that I actually started this podcast was to help people feel less alone, because I was working with people one-on-one in a coaching space. This was before I had events and retreats and all of those things. And I was working one-on-one with people, and I would get so many of the same similar things coming up. Like you said, I'm not worthy, I'm not enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough to do that, all of those types of things. And everyone thought they were the only one, because we're in a one-on-one conversation, right? And they're like being vulnerable and sharing with me, but everybody thinks that they're the only one of like, oh, well, yeah, that success is good for them. They probably weren't scared to do it. They're different than me, but they really aren't. And so one of my biggest things with this podcast was helping people see that they are not alone in that. And so I appreciate so much that all of my guests, just like you, are so vulnerable and open with their journeys. And I know that you have a similar mission with your podcast. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that? And because I know these are some things you're working on, how are you hoping to expand that brand?
My aim is similar, to make people not feel alone. And the podcast brings on guests to share their stories of vulnerability or being vulnerable in talking about their mental health challenges. Because just like you said, these things don't happen in a vacuum. There are millions of people out there that struggle with depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, borderline person, you name it. There are millions of people out there that experience these things. But because of the societal stigmas that exist today, people aren't comfortable talking about their problems and working through them and showing up as their full authentic self. And so that's what I was talking about earlier around emotional literacy. Is in the workplace that's beneficial, because when your employees feel seen and heard, Forbes did an article, and when employees are seen and heard or feel seen and heard, they are 4.6 times more likely to feel empowered at work. And that's huge. And so being someone who can be emotionally literate, i.e., meeting employees where they're at, surfacing emotions, being comfortable having conversations about emotions with your employees, positions you to get the best out of them. And it just creates a more, you talked about work-life integration. And I think that's a way to do it. So anyway, back to the podcast. Honestly Mental, it's also to save lives, to be honest. That's my goal. Coming from a place of wanting to unalive myself, I am not alone. And I know that. And just being a resource for people to listen to and the message resonates, I hope that the resources that I share, the tools that I use, that we give out on the podcast are a way for people to recognize that it doesn't have to be the end of their story. And so with that, we continue to record podcasts and talk about mental health at any opportunity possible.
And you're making me emotional right now just listening to that, because I know many of the listeners know I have personal experience with my brother. And especially when you said like, this doesn't have to be the end of your story. My husband and I both have semicolon tattoos. And really the meaning of that is, do you have one too? Yeah,
I do.
Yes. And, and really the meaning of that for anyone who isn't familiar is in writing, an author can choose to end a sentence with a period, or they can choose to continue it on with a semicolon. And, when you think of you are the author and that sentence is your life, it's really empowering to think like we do have the power of choice. And a lot of times we can't do this alone. So making sure that we are getting help and that we are talking about this and bringing up this topic and helping to reduce the stigma of talking about mental health is just so incredibly important. And I love that your mission is to save lives, because for all of those reasons that you just said, it's critical right now. So what would you say to someone listening who can see themselves in your story? What would you say to them?
Everyone is born inherently loved, worthy, and enough. We are all born with those things. And it's not until certain life circumstances that happen that change that sense of worthiness. And we have to go back to the beginning and remember that. And I think that's really critical as a human, that we were all created worthy and everybody was loved. And so I know circumstances are much more complex than that. But at the end of the day, that is one thing that we all have in common.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Okay. So where can our listeners find you if they're listening to this and like, I need this, I need to connect with Erika, I need to listen to, more of this topic?
Yeah. So the podcast also gets very personal and deep, just sharing as kind of a trigger warning. So I'm completely honest and transparent about my journey. And so are my guests. I think that's what makes it honest, hence the name Honestly Mental. You can find us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, any of your main streaming services. You can find the podcast there, Honestly Mental.
Perfect. And yeah, we're going to link the Instagram for the podcast and then the link directly to the podcast. And then also you personally are on LinkedIn. So we've got that linked for everyone as well. Erika, thank you so, so much for coming on today. Again, for your vulnerability, for your mission. I am here cheering you on. And I just think that the more of us that talk about these things and bring this out and have these conversations, the more we can move the needle.
Absolutely. So happy to have been here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you'd like to continue this conversation, connect with me on Instagram and say hello. You can find me at AmandaRiffy_coaching. In the meantime, if you know you are ready to step into the next incredible version of you and want to completely accelerate your personal and professional growth, let's work together. I offer one-on-one private coaching as well as workshops and in-person events. There's really something for everyone. To learn more, visit my website at acrprofessionalcoaching.com or send me a DM on Instagram and start a conversation. And don't worry, I truly want all of us to succeed. So I promise I will never steer you wrong. Let's create a career and life you love. Chat with you again soon.